regularly scheduled committee hearing of Arts, Parks, and LA River. We have several agenda items. We are joined by Councilmember Kerr and Price, and we will be joined shortly by our colleague Bob Blumenfield to make quorum. As we are awaiting Mr. Blumenfield's arrival for quorum, I'm going to go ahead and start with public comment, and we have one public comment card who's also filled out several others. So what we're going to do is we're going to give a total of 4 minutes for any individual who wants to speak on items or multiple items. And the person I'm going to call on before we start the agenda for public comment and all of the other comments that they want to make in a 4-minute period is Antonia Ramirez.
Thank you. Good morning. This is public comments. Ladies and gentlemen, on June the 9th, 2016, Thursday, Councilmember Jose Huizar and his political colleagues were making a press release from 9 a.m. to 9:55 a.m. from the empty lot next to the Music Center Grand Park, block number 4, right across the street from City Hall. They were giving a press release on the rendition of a new park, yet while I was listening to the Councilmember Jose Huizar, there was no emphasis on safety, security, cleanliness, video camera surveillance to deter vandalism and theft, which is mostly done by blacks, Chango Latino wetbacks, and gangbanging pussies, thieves, and pigs. It's a daily occurrence. Case in point, on June 7, 2016, I was dozing off at the Music Center Grand Park, Block 4, where I was laying on top of all my bags and my purse, which I didn't lock, stupid me. So from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., the vandals got into my wallet and stole over $500 from my bag. At 5:20, I quickly went to the LAPD officers Clemek and Tran. They were helpful, but no investigations conducted. Then in the evening, I went and I filed a police report with female officer Mendoza. Officer Mendoza, very polite, but again, no investigations. Many people get robbed at the Music Center Grand Park, block number 1, 2, 3, or 4 daily. So if you fall asleep, good luck. They're going to rob you. You will get robbed. And so I want to make sure that that gets said. And let me go over to agenda item number 3. Mr. James Herr, I hope that you'll be nothing like Rusty Kennedy in Orange County and or Eli Reyna in Orange County Human Relations Commission, because they both suck. I hope you will be open-minded, ethical, and honestly deny and accept lawful contributions and funding to honestly help deplorable race relations, because as many of us have seen and witnessed firsthand, the wetbacks and the Chango gangbangers, the black pimps, the black thugs, and the gays and lesbians are openly and brazenly, they have attacked, bullied, beaten, robbed, and vandalized and gang-stalked innocent, legal, law-abiding citizens. And they use this forum to protect themselves and further continue the abuses. So again, let's stop protecting them and stop protecting the victims. Stop using the Human Relations Commission as a protection or a shield, and start openly exposing them for what they really are. And that is, they are discriminatory, they are racist, they're immature, and they're violent. You do not use violence against another human being. Grow up. You know, you talk like the gangbangers. They don't talk, they just go for the punch. Okay? And item number 5. Yeah, this is long overdue, because as I have stated, one of the meetings that I attended, the Human Relations Commission, in my opinion, we should shut them all down. They are sucking money illegally because they are non-responsive and they incite further abuse by the bullies and brawlers and give us horribly flawed data. Case in point, blacks, wetbacks, gangbangers, and gays, for the most part, are problematic, private and public nuisances where they immediately engage again in violence, brawls, vandalism, and graffiti. And when you call the cops see a black suspect, holy hell, the cops will deny any safety and protection to the injured victims, because the blacks are above the law, and the Latinos think that they're entitled to anything and everything. And so again, stop these racist, discriminatory, hate-mongering groups. Stop the false advertisement and truly help the victims. Stop these deviants. And God bless Donald Trump. He will help us and protect us, and God bless America. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
And on that note, happy Monday, everyone. We are joined by our colleague, Bob Blumenfield, and that's all right. Their timing is pretty good, actually. We will, colleagues, what I'd like to do is take items 1, 4, 7, 8, 10, and 11 on consent. Again, that's items 1, 4, 7, 8, 10, and 11 on consent. We have a pretty packed agenda. We're going to hear some interesting items today, including some confirmations. And with that, Mr. Sutton-Willis, could you please read item 2?
Item number 2, communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Mr. Jesse Marez to the El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument Authority for the term ending June 30, 2020.
Is Mr. Marez present? Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the committee hearing and welcome to your reappointment hearing. And please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been focusing on as a commissioner at El Pueblo.
This is my first appointment after my first 4-year as a commissioner. I think what we've been focusing on is a lot of issues which include homelessness in our area, but more importantly, how we actually get more tourists to the Pueblo, but also how do we actually allocate parking spots for our tourists. We're going through some developments across the street with the Plaza de Cultura as well, and we're in communication with El Metro, which is going to also start enhancing the crosswalks.
And Mr. Marez, how is that the project, the development that's on the surface parking lots to the west of El Pueblo? What's the status of that?
It's still in discussion. We've had a couple of presentations of what it's going to look like, but we haven't really moved on anything else except for maybe they selected a developer that's going to work with the county as well as the city.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned homelessness as a challenge. What are some of the other challenges that you deal with or that face you?
Oh, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
You mentioned homelessness as an issue that you're dealing with. I think you did. I think I heard you say that. What are some of the other challenges or just challenges that you face as a commissioner that you're dealing with?
I believe just what we hear from our general manager and the issues they've had with folks at the park across the street, as well as walking around El Pueblo. Sometimes it's the first thing that some of the tourists see. It's a challenge, especially with some of the folks that come to the mission and get the meals from the church, using the bathrooms, which need upgrading as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. Colleagues, questions or comments? Mr. Price.
I just want to thank you for your service and for your willingness to serve. This is a real iconic historic location, and so we just support your efforts to make it more accessible and to help spread the word about the not just the historical significance, but the opportunities to learn more and to share. So thank you for your service. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's been a pleasure the last 4 years. I look forward to the next 4, hopefully.
I just appreciate the job you're doing and look forward to seeing you continue.
Appreciate it.
I echo that, and this committee will recommend you moving forward for your reappointment, and you'll be confirmed in council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to item 3.
Item number 3, communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Mr. James E. Herr to the Human Relations Commission for the term ending June 30, 2020.
And is Mr. Herr in? Oh, there we are.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Herr. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Inside.
What's that? Inside?
Inside.
Yes, yes. It'll be 100 degrees soon if it isn't already. So tell us a little bit about your time on the commission and what you're focused on and what you'd like to see moving forward.
I believe I'm concluding or getting close to concluding my second year on the commission. And we've been focused mostly on the issues between the community and police. There's a lot of voices that want to be heard. There's a lot of testimony that we have in our council meetings or commission meetings. And it's very difficult to have so many people wanting to speak out and not having the resources to really adequately provide them with the service that the commission has been appointed to do. It also makes it difficult for us to carry out other things that the commission needs to do in terms of raising money, raising support for the commission. We have a wonderful youth ambassador program that needs attention from the commission as well as staff, and that sets the groundwork for what the future of the city will be by providing leadership development opportunities for youth. So there's never a dull moment with the commission right now.
What do you see as the biggest challenges facing the commission in the next couple of years?
The relationship between the community and the police is very fractured. And we stand as sort of the neutral voice between the parties, which is what we're supposed to do. But there's not a lot of understanding, I think, on the part of the community to understand that we can advocate for them, but we do also have a responsibility to bring all parties to the table. And having those resources available to do that, I think, is the most important thing for the commission to try and get right now, because the relationship is really bad, and we need to stop it from getting worse, and we need to do stuff that begins to ameliorate the situation.
And those resources include funding for the mentorship programs. When you say resources, what other resources are you thinking?
Staff resources as well. Staff is stretched very, very thin across a number of commissions. So when we have to go out and make a commitment to the community to have public hearings outside of the commission's general meetings, that requires staff time, it requires our time, and it's very difficult to find that time.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions? Comments? All right. Well, so without objection, we will move you forward for reappointment, and we thank you for your service on this very, very important commission that is probably only going to gain in importance in the coming years as this heightened craziness all around us at the national level is amped up more than ever. So we appreciate the work you do.
Thank you, and we appreciate your support as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Sutton-Willis, that brings us to item 5.
Item number 5, continued from the June 6th committee meeting. Housing and Community Investment Department and Human Relations Commission reports relative to a plan for the city to engage in conversations and activities with regard to race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, diversity, and multiculturalism. We have staff available for discussion.
In just a moment, come on up. We have Patricia Villaseñor, Executive Director of Human Relations Commission, along with Francisco Ortega, Danielle Brazel of the Department of Cultural Affairs, and Assistant Chief B. Gurmala of LAPD. And colleagues, the group assembled before us today are here because of the motion that Mr. Weston and I introduced 1 year ago on July 1st, 2015. The reason and the purpose was to create a new path forward for Los Angeles. We're thinking about race, gender, religious pluralism, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and indeed the greatest asset that we have as Angelinos, that's our diversity and our multiculturalism. We have, because we've earned it, because of who we are as a city, are seen as leaders nationwide on how to figure these challenges out that I just referred to in an earlier comment, at a time where it's never been more important because of the issues that we're facing in the city of LA, and then the oftentimes hysterical dialogue at the national level when people who don't know what they're talking about talk past folks who need leadership. We know that all 3 departments have been working very, very hard to put this report together. Challenging process, having so many departments involved on such a topic, but especially in light of what happened last weekend, we expect great outcomes, and I think it's an opportunity for us to exhibit an example to the rest of the country on how we can de-escalate the passions that make people who shouldn't be doing certain things, make very bad decisions to harm others. So we need to do all we can here at the local level to see what we can do to spread this at the national level. So with that, I would love to see Patricia Villaseñor with HRC begin the presentation.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Councilman O'Farrell, for having us here today. First, I'd like to thank our partners, the Department of Cultural Affairs and LAPD, for joining us on this journey to get this report done, and then once into implementation, which is really where the heavy lifting is. Writing the report is significant, but actually putting this into practice is where it's going to make the most changes. It's going to include and bring together communities and start discussions that have been needed to start for a very long time. I think the work that we've done in the last 15 years with the Human Relations Commission has seen that communities are hungry to talk about race, cultural ethnicity, gender equity, et cetera, but there haven't been a systemic way in which to do it, and a way for us to measure it as well. I think that's important for the city. We need to understand what's really going on in these communities and what, as a city, can we do to alleviate some of those issues, and if the city itself plays any part in those issues. So I think that this is a great place to start. But again, it's just the start of the work. I'm going to pass it to Francisco Ortega. He'll be doing point on this project. He'll dedicate 100% of his time to this project so that we can ensure that we meet the goals that we have laid out for you on the report.
Terrific.
Yeah, I think I echo your sentiment as well, Council Member, and thank you, committee, for hearing this issue. This is not new to Los Angeles. I mean, the last two civil unrests that we had in the city had direct links to our law enforcement infrastructure and our relationship and the community's relationship to law enforcement. So this is not new, but I think that because of our partnership with LAPD and because of what LAPD has done since '92 to really bridge that gap, and the work that DCA already does in its mandate to create a cultural understanding and bridge people and bring people together and bring, really in essence, communities that don't typically come together. So this is a natural fit for us. Putting together a report like this is messy work, part of it because everyone's got their own internal mechanisms and pushing forward. So I think that what you have before you, the report that you have before you, is a collaborative effort. I think that we do a lot of learning as we work together, and in working together, we took the baton and we ran with it right away. But I think that as time has gone by, we really have whittled it down to where everyone at the table is beginning to really understand their role. And this is the key component, is understanding our role, understanding our core competency, understanding the things that we do well, and then doing them. Our plan is that in 1 year's time, we would pilot this in one community. We have 4 pilot communities that we've identified that we could go. And I've said that the whole city needs this. But I think that in order for us to really demonstrate that this is going to work as a collaborative effort and that we're going to really address equity, racial equity, and address human relations at a deep level, that we focus on one place, we do it right, we get everyone, we marshal our resources, and we get everyone really at the ground level working from the bottom up and from the top down, so that it's not that we're dictating to communities what they should be or should not be doing, but that we work in collaboration with our communities through a very smart plan at the top. So this is why I think having B. Gramala as our big ally and our big supporter and not our collaborator from LAPD has helped us tremendously. She understands this work very, very well. The GM for Cultural Affairs, Danielle Brazel, is not only demonstrated that leadership, but also has helped us really craft and understand not only the role of art, but the role of her agency in really creating these kind of changes. So what you have here is just we've structured it so that we can tell a story as well about Los Angeles and tell you that we want to be that city. We want to be the model city for the rest of the country that says we're going to be proactive here. We're not going to be victimized by the national rhetoric that's happening right now. We're going to take, and I applaud you guys because you took a step way before and you said we want to be that. And so in doing that, we've created this plan that is just a creation in the beginning, phase one. We really want to look at the city itself, but that's phase two. What we want to do is now assess, engage the public in these conversations that, as Patricia said earlier, we've had challenges in the past trying to bring people together and sit them in a forum and have a town hall and talk about, what's ailing you and why are you upset and why can we not, what's creating friction in our communities. And in a decade, we've learned so much, but we haven't really created a pathway for people to really connect to the city in a real way and understand that they have a huge role in their communities to be those change agents. So I think this is a beginning to take shape. And as you see, as you look at the report and you go back, we have some immediate outcomes that we want to see. And you see, of course, everyone's role within it, including Human Relations, DCA, and LAPD. Those are the three central departments. And then you start seeing some of the outcomes that we hope to achieve. We want to pilot our first year in one community. It was ambitious to say we would do 4 in 1 year. And it is. As you come down to it, you realize that not only fiscally and economically is it an ambition, but I think that socially, which is the more important part here, the networking that needs to happen and the deep engagement, that would take time. Remember, the operative word here is building long, sustainable trust with people so that they can begin to advocate not only at their regional level, but then become really aware of the structures within our city and within the bigger landscape. So I'm not going to go through each and every one of those outcomes, but I would like to give the opportunity for my partners to really articulate their role as well in this process. And I would just want to say this. We've been meeting since last year, right when you introduced the motion. Like I said, we started really quickly. I think that it is now a year later, and I think we're really now humming. It took that long because I think that there was some lessons learned in terms of being a good collaborator and a convener. So.
Thank you, Francisco.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a new template.
It is.
It's a new partner. So before I'd like Assistant Chief Grimaldi, so I want to welcome Mr. David Rue here. And
thank you. I will keep my remarks brief. But first of all, this process has truly been a journey, a collaborative one, an educational one. And I have to really thank Francisco, Patricia, and Danielle for accompanying us on that journey. It's been very, very important for the department as well. I have to mention that Chief Beck has been on board and informed and has met with me on this project, and it has his full commitment, and I think that's very important. Also, as his LGBTQ liaison, and also the liaison to the HRC, I think it's very important that I was part of those discussions, and I truly appreciate the inclusion at every juncture, including all the way up, including the final draft. So thank you all so much for that. I think a point has to be made that this project is pushing out some of the stale, old projects and discussions that the city is so used to being engaged in, because that's where our comfort level is. And I have to applaud Patricia and Francisco for being bold enough to say, hey, not the same old, that would be the easy way to go about this. It took some time to give birth to this project and the ideas behind it, but the old town halls, the old bringing some of the supporters together is not the point of this project. It's to, as you said, Francisco, to dig deep and to get to the roots of discomfort within communities, and hoping that we are building something that is not just lip service or another nice thing that we can say we did and check the box. So I just want to say thank you so much. I also met with the Office of Operations Assistant Chief, Michael Moore, He is totally committed to supporting this project and, again, making sure that our first responders, who are the first lines of delivery of any service within the community, are the ones that are engaged in this program. It's one to have managers and supervisors, quote unquote, get the picture. But what we want is we want the engagement of the officers that are knocking on the door, stopping the vehicle, making the pedestrian stop, part of this intimate project. So I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. And Danielle, thank you for all that you taught me during this process.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Grimala. Ms. Brazil.
It's a pleasure to report to the committee on our progress. It has been an ongoing learning process for these three entities to collaborate and to learn and to listen and to align our agencies' resources within our own prospective missions to achieve the goals outlined in the motion. The depth, breadth of any society is truly reflected in its arts and culture. And this motion, in my opinion, reflects a larger national conversation that we're having. I think Councilmember O'Farrell, you alluded to it, but we're really having a conversation at the national level within the arts and cultural sector around race and cultural equity. And equity is not the same as equality, as we know. When we talk about equity, it's about making sure that everyone can see over the fence, that everyone has access to the same tools and resources, so that they can compete and live a fully creative life. I just got back from Boston, where I attended the Americans for the Arts Convention, and some of our colleagues across the country are doing really extraordinary work. The mayor in Seattle has created a department specifically on race and social justice. So really kind of looking at what are the internal as well as external systems, and then making sure that every department within the city has the competencies, the cultural competencies, to operate in this landscape. Our colleagues up in San Francisco have also done an extraordinary job in moving forward on a racial equity statement. And Americans for the Arts, the leading national arts organization, just released a cultural equity statement that I'd like to read. Because when we talk about cultural equity, what are we talking about? And we're defining it as cultural equity embodies the values, policies, and practices that ensure that all people, including but not limited to those who have been historically underrepresented based on race, ethnicity, age, ability, sexual orientation, gender, socioeconomic status, geography, citizenship status, or religion. And that those people are represented in the development of arts policy, the support of artists, the nurturing of accessible, thriving venues for expression, and the fair distribution of programmatic, financial, and informational resources. The Department of Cultural Affairs needs this to take this opportunity to lean into this conversation to help identify a cultural policy moving forward for the city of Los Angeles. And so as I'm thinking that we're going to be engaged in building this conversation with our colleagues, I'm looking at to what end. And the end is to ensure that everyone has the ability to engage their full creative self, that artists of diverse cultural representation and of diverse communities that reflect our population have the opportunity to thrive and to uplift their own communities. And so I want to thank you, and I want to thank this working group for trying to figure out how we align and what we can do together to benefit the people of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I mentioned earlier that this is a bit of a new template. Historically, traditionally, when we think of HRC, we think of police relations with communities that have historically struggled and been disenfranchised. and that is the template that we're used to. And as you know, Danielle, you and I have had long conversations about this. I come from an arts background. I come from a poor family in rural Oklahoma, but arts were important. And so I know personally how the availability of art and culture, no matter what the income level is, how that can unlock certain intellectual, psychological, emotional abilities that someone may not otherwise have. And if folks aren't exposed to the incredible splendor and miracle of art through these other structures, then I think that it diminishes our ability to include more people. And I don't know if that makes sense the way I just described it, but that's why I personally feel our Department of Cultural Affairs is such an important piece moving forward, because that's just going to bring more people in. Yes. And increase the size of the participants exponentially as never before. And Chief Grimal, you mentioned stale, right?
Maybe that was too strong.
Well,
I think it's truthful.
I think so too. We need to just refresh, reboot, enliven the conversation, and bring in the arts, and how that informs relations between all of the groups. And politics can't do it. Suppression on our streets in high crime areas aren't going to achieve that. They might keep us safer, and we got to have it, but it's not going to quite unlock what we are going after here. And I think this is a more all-in approach. So I think we're on our way to something really good with this community engagement plan. And I want to thank you, Ms. Villaseñor, for sort of being the glue has held this together and helped push it, because I've worked with you for 17 years. I was just thinking about that.
Thanks for giving my age away.
I know. I think you were in junior high school when you started.
So. I was a volunteer at the time.
Or was it grade school? And then you, Mr. Ortega, for many, many years as well. And so you know how to run a meeting where you just de-emphasize where all of the fractures are, and you emphasize what we have in common. You're so good at it, you can phone it in. I want to make sure that we attract individuals who otherwise, sometimes we get all of the allies to the meeting and not beyond that, and we need to get beyond that so that we really do make this difference as we lean forward into this. So with that, you've been meeting regularly now for several months. How often do you intend on meeting moving forward throughout this process?
I think once we go into the implementation, I think the first thing we need to do is decide what that assessment strategy is going to be. First, by picking the community we're going to go into. We'll work with both our collaborative partners to come to a consensus as to which of the 4 recommended we'll go into first. And once we're there, we'll start pulling what resources we already have on the ground to see how we can build on that rather than going in as if it's brand new everything. I know that Human Relations has many different programs, many different on-the-ground collaborative partners that we'll be going to. I know DCA has the same. They have many programs and projects already in existence that we can build and wrap around as well, and vice versa. And obviously, I think one of the big things that we're very excited about LAPD is the commitment for the first responders to be part of this, where we'll be training whatever division in that first area to really be part of it. Those officers, sometimes we don't really have access to them, but now with the commitment from LAPD, we will. And I think that's really key for many of these communities, that we do have that access and able to really talk to these officers and include them as part of the community dialogues.
That's terrific. Wonderful. In the report, you talk about a baseline data bar. What partnerships will be involved in establishing that for the overall ongoing evaluation?
I think for HRC, one of the things that we committed to bring to the table is our academic advisors that that work with us constantly to try to articulate an index for HRC. As you know, the work that we do is very nuanced. How can you say something didn't happen because of the work we did? So in the last several years, we've been working with dedicated academic researchers to try to develop those. Part of our coming to the table is to bring those academic researchers to work with LAPD, DCA, and HRC to develop those indexes, to see what would be viable baseline so that we can say what was it when we went in and what is it now that we've left and what have we left behind. So we'll be working with them to develop that.
And we'll be collaborating on this from creative and cultural vitality index. So I'm very interested in how do we assess cultural vitality in communities in Los Angeles? We know that there's no shortage of creativity. What we do know is that there's a shortage of cultural infrastructure, which creates barriers and obstacles for communities to be able to support arts and cultural activities. This is a very difficult challenge for us, and some of you around on this committee understand that it's very difficult to move arts and cultural services into your prospective communities for the lack of cultural infrastructure. So if we don't start identifying that and bringing light to it, we won't be able to develop strategies to move through and to prioritize. So that's one of the things that I think we're going to be bringing to this table. The other thing that I think is really important is that we identify that, yes, arts and culture can be a means for as an economic development tool, but I think that we're undercutting ourselves by seeing it as also a core component to public safety and also to neighborhood development and revitalization. And so those are really large systemic challenges that we as a city and communities face, and that's going to take us some time to really think about what's the 3 to 5 year plan in any one community to develop the necessary infrastructure to help achieve some of the goals that we're trying to get to, which is really about increased public safety, increased livability, increased economic prosperity, but it's got to be long-term planning.
And, Ms. Brazil, I think that's well said, and I think that just a byproduct of growing arts and cultural programs across the city will be a reduction in crime, a reduction in X, Y, and Z, that the social ills of society. Right. So, which I think, again, adds credence to your involvement here. Right. And you talk about social equity and arts infrastructure. That's exactly, I think, what can be a strong foundation for these traditionally underserved communities that are quite honestly just thought of in very stereotypical ways, really. There's just so much more that these communities have to offer, and we tap into that, and then the byproduct is better neighborhoods and all the other things you mentioned. So I think that's where the magic happens. That's the magic of art and culture, right? So really good stuff. Now, you mentioned, Mr. Ortega, you mentioned pilot program.
Yeah.
Do you have in mind where? If not, that's cool. Something to deliberate about.
We had identified 4 locations initially. One was Councilmember Curran Price's district around the south central area. We've also identified another one in the northeast around the Glassell Park community. Pacoima also was a site that we thought would be very important. And also in the west side, we thought Venice, California would be a place that we could go. And also there's a lot of infrastructure there already. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of diversity there. But we thought that as a collaborative unit, we would determine what the best location would be and what's already there. I know that Councilmember Price has already been involved with this. This is something he's assessing, sort of the cultural landscape of his district, and has had town hall meetings on that very issue. So those places to us seem very attractive because they have all the components that we feel, and then for us, we would really get into the grassroots community to bring them to engage, and not, as you said, the traditional sort of let's engage the people who agree with us and the people who love us or the people who love LAPD or love DCA, but that we are going to do an outreach strategy that has never been done before. That means we're going to door, we're going to community members, and we're saying, this is your neighborhood, this is what we've got going on, and you tell us, you tell us what's going on. And that's part of the assessment tool that we're really trying to develop here.
It's really challenging communities to define their own healthy community. I think a lot of times, departments go in with their definition of what is a healthy community through our perspective. But this time we're going to go to the community and say, what's a healthy community for you? And that may include things that we don't want to hear and that they'll surprise us, but it's also the same thing, it's also challenging them for solutions. I think one of the things that many times that we don't take into account is that communities have a lot of great ideas how to address their own issues in their own communities, and part of our reporting is going to bring those to light.
Mm-hmm. And you feel that you can go into a pilot program initially without additional funding, just to take a look and get first blush on what that might entail moving forward in terms of funding, because nothing is going to happen without funding, and I realize that.
We want to prove something, Mr. Ferrer. We want to prove that we can do something. And we're not saying it's not going to cost. It's going to cost us, right? But I think that we want to prove that we can do this on a very low budget in terms of people power, in terms of some in-kind stuff and some philanthropy and people who are going to join us in this process. But we want to prove to the city that it is doable in that very, sort of low-cost way, so that in the future we can garner more attention for this project and expand it as much as possible and create an infrastructure. So you're absolutely right. Nothing is free, and nothing is going to be such low cost that we could just do it like without thinking. But about the financial cost. But that's our plan initially.
Yeah. The pilot will be basically, I know for HRC, we'll be moving around current resources and pulling Francisco off of projects that he's doing, leveraging with other staffers so that we could at least have a dedicated staffer to this. We're also recruiting some graduate school level interns to help with this as well. So it will be done with current resources, with the understanding that we are probably going to target a small community, knowing that this should be replicated throughout the entire city if we really want to see the change that we're hoping to promote.
Terrific. And I know
I just wanted to note one thing. I think we are going into this expecting to be surprised. I think, Patricia, you said it best. We're expecting to hear things that we did not know, because if this project does not uncover those, then again, we go back to my stale term again. And we should be going in with some boldness, with some energy, and some fearlessness if we are really going to make this project count and for it to have longevity. If not, we're wasting everybody's time, and not one person sitting in this room, and I know at this table, is looking toward that. But I think we need to pick up some stones and see what's underneath, and we have to have a welcoming spirit that encourages people other than the cheerleaders to come forward. And I really feel that that's the formula that we have here.
Terrific.
And I would add that I think in relation to the timing of this is going to be critical, because we will be coming back and we will need to develop a very strong proof of concept and a model. But we know with the city's budget process, that means that we'll need to come back around, by November, because we'll be really understanding what this work will entail and the resources needed to support it.
And that's when you'll need your cheerleaders. Head cheerleader right here.
No.
No, thank you. No, I appreciate it. No, I'm just.
Thank you.
I'm being somewhat serious on that.
Yes.
No, I appreciate it. And then just lastly, in terms of this conversation, schools, LAUSD, I bring them up a whole lot. 600,000 students, the majority of whom live in Los Angeles, who have families that live in Los Angeles. What an untapped resource that is in terms of just cultural opportunities, and talk about a base for what we want to achieve that unites all of our goals in terms of the population we could reach. I ask that you explore that, and we put our heads together on how to break that through. I think that we're starting to make some headway in breaking down those barriers on a variety of different issues. The whole joint use agreement issue for our parks and schools, and their legal counsel is withdrawing from that, but we're trying to compel them back and really force that issue. So there's a push me, pull me sort of thing going on with LAUSD schools right now, the charter schools, et cetera. And I think that's a real potential population that we need to harness. Yeah. So, all right.
And we serve that population through our community arts centers. While there's joint use challenges with LAUSD, we do have a dynamic service relationship with the same students. Largely, those students are Title I, low income, and would not have access to arts and cultural services otherwise. We serve them in Canoga Park, we serve them in Watts, we serve them at the Manchester Youth Arts Center, Barnsdall Art Park, over 30 community art centers around the city. And one of my jobs and great opportunities as General Manager of the Department of Cultural Affairs is really to highlight the city's investment in the youth of our city and to make sure that we leave no youth untapped for their creative potential.
Great. We have a lot to work with. That's very encouraging. Colleagues, Mr. Price.
I'm just excited to see the collaboration that's taking place, and it certainly is around, I think, a subject that directly impacts all of our areas and the quality of life. And I think the intersection of safety, livability, economic development, and the arts is an exciting way to bring these resources together. You mentioned focusing on one of these areas initially. You think that's going to happen within the next couple of months or the next year? What's the plan?
I think that it's bold. This year, we want to at least begin to pilot it this year, and I think soon after this, we're going to reconvene as a collaborative and continue to work on those and hash those issues out. So
there really is a need, I think, to explore these issues all over the city.
Yeah.
So the sooner we can roll them out, I think the better we'll be. And even as you suggested, it's not going to be a cookie cutter one size fits all approach. Each area could be a little differently, and that's, I think, the excitement is a chance to really tailor the projects and activities, the dialogues, the celebrations, the murals in a way that helps us leverage these limited resources. So I'm looking forward to the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you
for your
Mr.
work.
Blumenfield.
Great, thank you. And really appreciate what you guys are doing and support the mission and the aspirations 1,000%. So thank you for that. Help me understand in terms of the metrics for success, in terms of what we would look at in 6 months or a year or 5 years if we wanted to, measure our success in this endeavor.
I think one of the issues that we're going to be is developing those. I know human relations will have a different metrics than DCA and LAPD, and the goal is to bring them all together so that there is a working document so that we can ensure that we hit them all. One of the things for human relations is that we'll be doing a pre and post survey and assessment of those communities that we're going into on the issue of race and all the others. We're also doing a social media campaign so that we can do a survey of outcomes. But one of the things that we are going to be doing immediately in the next few weeks is developing those metrics.
I think that your question, I think, is so spot on, and I think you're in the right track, asking us for, off the top of my head, I would see that we all have our different outcomes. For me, what I would like to see an increased engagement with LAPD that yields in safer communities and yields public safety is increased in these communities. The violence in these communities is diminished, so we have to do a baseline to figure that out. The other component is, I think, really getting those first responders from the LAPD to engage like they've never engaged before with our communities. And it's on us to really begin to identify those touch points at the ground level. So measuring that is also going to take some creativity, but also the other components for me, like art and arts infrastructure, as Danielle has talked about, is so pivotal and so important. It's a natural thing where if you're bringing creativity to a community and not bringing it, really tapping into it, it's there. We just haven't tapped it, that we begin to see some of those other changes that we're talking about too. Economic development should be sort of a thing that runs through this whole project. So off the top of my head, those are the things that I think we're going to be addressing.
For the LAPD, when we talk about quality of life, what does safety mean to each particular community? It's more than just not hearing gunfire at night. It has to be looked at on a multi-level. Does it mean less conflict in the school system? Does it mean less property crime? There's a variety of things that go into each and every unique community's definition of what safety is to them. And to Mr. Price's remarks, it's not a one-size-fits-all. And we have to be very clear that when we do our own type of community survey, be it online or however that may be, it has to be more than just cold, hard crime statistics with regard to Part 1 crime, violent, and property. It has to cross all those levels, and again, being very specific on how safety is defined to each and every community and all members of it as well.
I think it's really important that you guys are starting to touch on them, that to define these up front, and even before starting any pilots or anything to that effect. And it's especially important. A lot of times people get it in the reverse. You take the highly quantitative stuff, and that's where people focus all their metric-based work. And the more qualitative kinds of things that you're referring to, it's harder to get those metrics. People often put them off, or they're kind of buried in amorphous kind of metrics. And that will make the arguments much harder down the road.
Right.
So to have metrics, both on the overall scale, but also, causality metrics as opposed to just the relationship metrics would be really important. So I look forward to seeing how you develop those, and just want to put my 2 cents in that we really focus on those early on, because once you get going in the pilot, you'll have ruined your baseline on those metrics.
Great.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this important issue to our committee, and thank you. And I was very honored to second it along with Council President Weston and Harris Dawson. And this is so important. The president, ever since I got elected, on a few occasions, have brought it up to myself and Councilman Harris Dawson about having a discussion on race. And so I know the president is personally interested and engaged. And I think in our previous meeting, one of our fellow colleagues mentioned how we're one of the most diverse city councils, except for lack of females, lack of women. But it's not just that we're one of the most diverse city councils, but we're very collaborative. And I really want to thank HRC. Patricia. You've been on the forefront, not just for this. The dialogue, but trying to revamp how the commission works. I know I am in full support. I know we started the discussion about. I think you have a staff of entire staff of what is it?
Right now we have 3.
3, right? And you're
plus our wonderful administrative staff.
Right, and you're taking on this one of the most important dialogues that our city needs to have. So and. Thank you for that. LAPD, Chief Kamala, you've been a tremendous partner. We just did a kickoff for the Koban, which is at the Grove, right? Which is in the model of community policing. So, this all adds into it. And from a decade ago, 2 decades ago, the LAPD has made tremendous leaps and bounds. And I'm glad that you haven't rested on your laurels there, and you're trying to improve additionally. With DCA, thank you so much. We've worked so much well together. Everything that you're doing, we just can't get enough. We want to do more.
This is my problem.
and everything you said is very important. And I'm very much looking forward to the 4 discussions we're going to have in the city. I know it's a pilot, and I'm glad that. A little disappointed to hear that you're going to do 1 first, but I get it. It's capacity. It's doing it right. It's not doing. It's about quality, not just quantity. Because after you finish your first 4, I have lots of other areas that I like to focus as well. But it's very important that we do this discussion correctly. And thank you for bringing it up earlier about equity versus equality. And it's funny because the chairman was part of the discussion in the other committee that we had where Supervisor Zevioslavsky came with UCLA where they did a quality of life study survey in LA. And one of the shocking things was people were content with public safety. The issue that they had most concerns was surrounded economic security, which goes to your equity, what that Donna was talking about, right? The equity argument, and how people are concerned for their economic well-being. So it would be very interesting to see how this all, I mean, you guys are the experts, you guys have it all, have the right grasp, and the fact that you guys are looking for what we don't know, what we haven't thought of, that's very encouraging. So I really thank you for all your work, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this important issue to our committee.
Sure.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. So, colleagues, I would like to give the following instructions. Instruct, and there are no public comments cards on this item, I see. Instruct the HRC to coordinate and facilitate community dialogues throughout the city to achieve the objectives, goals, and strategies in collaboration with the LAPD and the DCA as described in the HCID report dated June 16th of this year, and to report with recommendations based on the feedback received from the community meetings. Furthermore, instruct the HRC and the LAPD to report back within 120 days on the policy outcomes delineated in the report. I'd like to further instruct the HRC, LAPD, and the DCA to coordinate and work on the outcomes of the community engagement plan as described in the report dated June 16th of this year, including metrics, baseline data to inform the desired outcomes. Instruct the DCA to identify and report back specific programs, grants that will be available for this collaboration when we return in August, essentially. And then also to further articulate, after internal discussions, the pilot program and rationale for choosing the particular one of 4 that you've outlined in the initial report.
Great.
And we thank you for this great work.
Thank you.
Really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your work so far, and we look forward to hearing back.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And seeing as there are no objections, we will move this report forward.
Mr. Chair? Sure.
Yes,
Just
sir.
for the record, I forgot to mention, I missed the meeting earlier. If I could just congratulate Mr. Jim Herr, good friend of mine, who being reappointed, who will be working on this. Thank you, Jim, for your future service.
Terrific. Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Sutton-Willis, that moves us to item 6.
Item number 6, a motion, Bonin, Martinez, O'Farrell, Koretz, Wesson, relative to the recommendation on the necessary steps to update, reorganize, and modernize Los Angeles Municipal Code 6344 to achieve compliance with state law on extending the protections of gender identity and gender expression laws to public bathroom use. I believe we have staff available for discussion.
Thank you. We have City Attorney Ms. Valerie Flores to briefly present on her initial findings. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've worked for the City Attorney's Office for over a decade, and I long have marveled at how convoluted and complicated the ordinance are relating to parks and how outdated. And this issue became acute when I realized that the bathroom ordinance really does not honor the civil rights of our transgender community. And all over the nation, at the federal and state level, governments are starting to make sure that bathroom access is open and available to all. And our ordinance, because it's so old and outdated, doesn't. So that's one of the issues. The other issue is that the code is duplicative, redundant, sometimes contradictory. It's very difficult to find things. The Parks Ordinance is 15 pages long. It segregates parks into beach parks and regular parks, even though a lot of the provisions are the same, so sometimes you have to look in two different places to find one answer. The penalty structure is off. Things that should be misdemeanors or would qualify as a misdemeanor don't, whereas things that shouldn't, like vending, can have separate, lesser issues. So I think a reorganization and a modernization is long overdue. One of the other issues is that the park hours, vary. There's a default for park hours from closing at 10:30 at night and opening at 5:30 in the morning. But parks where there's a special need for different hours are called out. But anytime the city wants to change hours for a park, either extend hours or limit hours, there's not a lot of flexibility. It only can be done by ordinance, which often, even for a simple change, half an hour here or there is a long 6-month process. And so one of the things you might want to look at is a process to either allow the board, the Rec and Parks Board to do it, which of course council can always look at through the 245 process, or at least some streamlined version where maybe the Rec and Park Board will set an hour and then council can concur by resolution, which is faster than an ordinance. For any park that has unusual hours, those hours should be posted so that people using the park have notice of what that particular park's hours are if they're unusual. But these are just some of the improvements I think that could make the park system work better. There's also a provision in the current code which allows the general manager, in case of an emergency, to completely close a park. And you might want to consider whether you want to extend that authority to temporarily change park hours. If there's construction nearby or flooding or some other issue that affects part of the park but not other parts of the park, if there was a little bit more flexibility, I think, I think it would help the park system.
Terrific. So what I'm hearing is times have changed and we need to be much more nimble.
Correct.
Especially with regard to the gender neutral issue and then also park hours.
Right.
Interesting what happens when you do a motion. It calls into other...
I have, as I said, I've been long hoping that someone would, ask us to look at our park ordinance and modernize it. So I appreciate your leadership on this. But again, the bathroom issue is acute. I think we need to immediately make it clear that transgender individuals can use the bathroom that's associated with their gender identity.
Sure. Now, to this date, have we, as the city, received any legal inquiries or challenges related to our policy on our current policy?
Not yet. So, right now we're looking at the park, because there's actually an ordinance making it illegal for someone to use the bathroom in a park that is different than their gender. But, one of the things maybe council would like us to have us look at is, other provisions. Might there be some for libraries or other city facilities? Now, I think through executive directive and funding, I think the city could immediately start changing some of the bathroom signs to make them more welcoming to all. But we certainly would be willing to go look through the code, department by department, and make sure there are no other ordinances that discriminate like the parks ordinance does.
To this date, has the city issued any guidance to the various departments on gender-neutral restrooms or gender identity?
Not to my
Not yet.
knowledge. It hasn't come through our office. But again, I think perhaps some immediate executive directive or council action
make
would
that
be
instruction.
appropriate. Yes.
Okay, and so when we, and I think we'll likely address the whole park hour issue since it's just, again, so archaic in its wording and so inflexible. Through the resolution, will that also enable the LAPD to enforce like they currently do? Will that be just
Yes,
go along with it?
Right. So the suggestion would be that for any park that has hours different than the default ordinance hours, that would be 10:30 to 5:30, that park be posted with signs so people using the park know what those different hours are. Some of the parks that have different hours are already posted, like Venice Beach is open till midnight, so that park has its own signs. But that would be a way to give notice, but also make changes quickly to address either the need for longer or shorter hours at any given park, rather than going through the ordinance process every time. So now, part of the reason the park ordinance is so long is that every park that has a different hour is spelled out in the code, so you have pages and pages of park hours.
Right. Well, we certainly need to change that. Thank you so much. Colleagues, questions, comments? Mr. Blumenfield.
So this isn't just about parks, though. It's about any city facility. Is that right?
Well, today we're talking about changing the parks ordinance to make bathrooms available to transgender persons. But as a suggestion, the council or the mayor's office may want to look at all city bathrooms to ensure civil rights are being respected.
And to take it a step further, what about bathrooms that the city enforces access to but are not city bathrooms? And what I'm talking about particularly is gas stations. You know, under the state code, gas stations have to provide access to travelers to their restrooms. A lot of times they don't do it, but they have to under state law. If you look at in the code, it actually says the city, municipalities shall enforce this state law. So in this case, it seems that we could even extend this to gas stations, you know, to where the city has the charge of enforcing access.
Right. If we're asked to, and we're certainly happy to do it, when we do a review of our codes, that issue may come up. So if we're being asked to enforce laws that we don't think protect civil rights, you know, we can call those out. We could actually go through our codes and present a whole list to the council of all of the provisions that deal with bathrooms in the city, including those that we simply manage. But I'm hoping also there might be some change at the state level. But if not, we can try to act where we can in the interim.
Okay, thank you.
Great suggestion. Colleagues, any other? No? Well, I'd like to do, again, no public comment on this item, it looks like. What I'd like to do is approve the motion which requests the city attorney to report in 60 days with recommendations on the necessary steps to update, reorganize, modernize LEMC 6344 to achieve compliance with state law relative to extending the protections of gender identity and gender expression laws to public bathroom use. Request the city attorney to draft an ordinance for council consideration as reflected by the content of this motion. Request city attorney to report and amend the ordinance so that park hours can be changed by resolution per council and approval. And I would add one further instruction, and that is to provide feedback. I think maybe separate from this one action, since we're working on an ordinance here, but I think you could report back to this committee on state law vis-a-vis local enforcement regulations on other requirements that the city is held to accountable to in relation to the conversation about restrooms in gas stations.
Okay, we'll look at that.
I think this is probably the beginning, and I think also we don't know where state law is going to land with some of those instructions either, but we know that some plans are afoot at the state as well. We just wanted to act on this because there's a lot we can do locally in the immediate and not wait around for other state law to wend its way forward. So with that, I would ask for your approvals on that without objection. That is the action we will take.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Flores. All right. That brings us to item 9.
Item number 9, Board of Public Works report relative to the various recommendations regarding Plan Alternative 20 to implement the proposed LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project. We have BOE staff available for discussion.
Terrific. In what Mr. Sutton Willis read in about 10 seconds has only taken about 10 years to get to. And so we have joining us today, we have sitting at the table Major Scott Outeen, along with Deborah Weintraub of the Bureau of Engineering. We're going to be also joined by Dr. Carol Armstrong of Bureau of Engineering and the Mayor's Riverworks team. We also have Ed DeMesa, Chief Planning Division of the Army Corps of Engineers, and we might have Timothy McWilliams join us also. And then I made light of the whole sort of at least 10 years, I want to say. Right. 10 years and lots of work. What a long journey with the Army Corps of Engineers, bringing us one step closer to adopting the environmental document for the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project. It's still a mouthful. I want to thank our partners, the Army Corps of Engineers, from Colonel, now General Toy, who we all worked with back in the day, Colonel Colleton, and now Colonel Gibbs, David Van Dorp, many, many others who have been along for the ride from the local and national office, especially the local office of Army Corps of Engineers. We have collectively all supported and continue to support the vision for the Rio de los Angeles. And we want to thank the Army Corps specifically for standing with us in this effort. Lots of challenges still. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy, and I think that this whole issue has been a case study on that. There are land costs and brownfield remediation cleanups, but we have a very clear roadmap now, approved by both the city, federal government, to proceed on this path to restoration. And we can all agree at the heart of this city is the LA River, and it's inspired imaginations, young and old, for generations and decades. And having said that, we have our distinguished panel here to begin the presentation. Thank you and welcome.
Councilman O'Farrell, good morning, or good afternoon, I should say now. I'm Deborah Weintraub. I'm the Chief Deputy City Engineer with the Bureau of Engineering. I've worked on this project now for close to 15 years, and it's my privilege to bring forward for your consideration the Environmental Impact Report for the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study, commonly called the Arbor Study. The action before you today is a recommendation of adoption of the EIR and the related documentation as is detailed in the engineer's report to the Board of Public Works that was forwarded to you here at Council. The study has been a 10-year partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers. I have a new colleague here to my left, who's the new Deputy Commander, Major Scotty Outeen. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. But we've worked with many folks with the Army Corps over these 10 years. The partnership has been productive, creative, strong. There have been many people involved. Your leadership, Councilman O'Farrell, has been very important to us, and also the leadership of former Council Member Ed Reyes. The LA River community has given us staunch support for the Arbor Study. I want to particularly thank Lewis McAdams and the Friends of the LA River, who went so far as to contribute almost $1 million to help complete the study. So with that, we do have for you here today a brief presentation, and then I will open it to my colleagues for comments and input. So I would like to ask my staff member, Carol Armstrong, who's worked with me on this for about 10 years, to give you a brief presentation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councilmember O'Farrell and distinguished committee members. Thanks so much for having us here. This is a super riverly day. I'm really excited to be here. As you know, this project started about 13 years ago when former Councilman Ed Reyes and U.S. Representative Lucille Roybal-Allard started with a reconnaissance study. And so now all these many years later, we are here today to present the recommended plan. Go ahead. So as Deborah indicated, today what we're asking for is certification of the final EIR, adoption of the CEQA, and approval of that recommended plan, which was formerly known as Alternative 20. So just for everyone's benefit, you can see that the Los Angeles River is 51 miles. The first 32 miles flow through the city of Los Angeles, and the first 32 miles are the focus of the City Council adopted LA River Revitalization Master Plan, which was adopted by the Council in 2007. And the subset 11 miles is the focus of what we're talking about here today. the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study, also known as the Arbor Study. So this is what the Arbor Study looks like, those 11 miles, and you can see these strategic interventions. And what we have done has been very purposeful about selecting where those ecosystem restoration interventions would happen. They are leveraging resources of the state of California when they purchased very large sites next to the Los Angeles River. I want to point out in particular to the left, you've got the you've got Rio de Los Angeles State Park and the Taylor Yard parcel. If the city is able to acquire that, it would be the first time that we could connect LA River State Park to the river. So this is an example of some of the interventions and how we are approaching it. We have divided the project along with the Army Corps of Engineers into 8 reaches to be strategic about how we implement moving forward. And you can see on the bottom there, it's an indication of about how many acres would be restored in each reach. Next, I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this in the first place. You can see on the left what our ecosystem profile used to look like prior to urbanization and channelization, and now what we have on the right. So what we are doing is we are actually redressing a historic wrong, because 90% of Southern California's riparian habitat has been lost, and 95% of its wetlands have been lost. And in moving forward with this project, we are in fact implementing a major recommendation of the city's LA River Revitalization Master Plan, which is to restore a functional riparian ecosystem. Okay, so not only is this intervention important locally and even regionally, it's important globally. Why? Because we exist within one of only 5 Mediterranean-type climate regions worldwide. And that scarce climate habitat type covers only 2% of the globe's surface, but accounts for at least 20% of its plant species. Also, we exist within one of only 35 biodiversity loss hotspots identified worldwide by Conservation International. So the interventions that we're making today will have far-reaching impacts. Here again is an example of what we have today. This is the example at Taylor Yard. You can see Sonia Sotomayor Learning Academy next to Rio de Los Angeles State Park, and between them and the river is the Taylor Yard G2 parcel. And on the bottom is what the restoration would look like, actually being able to change the channel for the first time since it was put there in the 1930s. And this is an example of the site, the sacred site to the city culturally, because this is where the settlement party stopped. And when they decided to establish El Pueblo, they named the city and the river at the same time. This is the confluence with the Arroyo Seco. We asked the Army Corps of Engineers if this could be included in the ecosystem restoration study, and they said yes. So just to summarize a little bit about what the Arbor Study means, it extends about 11 miles, which is 22 miles of riverfront. It will restore in 8 different reaches. It will restore over 700 acres. It will connect 3 tributaries to the river, connect 3 state park sites, and create more than 16,000 construction jobs. And as we're going along, it will implement at least 30 projects of our master plan. So, in moving forward to build the master plan, or build the recommended plan, Alternative 20, the total project cost is $1.4 billion. And I want to put that a little bit in perspective, because it's the largest urban ecosystem restoration project in the country. And the $376 million that is in the current authorization bill at the federal level is the 3rd largest federal expenditure commitment of all Army Corps projects in the nation. And of the 25 approved Army Corps projects, only 7 exceed total costs of $100 million. And only 2 projects have a larger federal commitment, and that's a hurricane relief project in Louisiana and restoration of the Everglades, which at 18,000 square miles is the largest subtropical wilderness in the United States. So this gives you an idea of the magnitude of our project and how important it is to the nation and what the cost share looks like moving forward. So it's really important to understand that the city is the driver of implementation, because the city is responsible for acquiring the lands and cleaning them up and delivering them to the project. The city will determine the sequencing, how we move forward. And so again, just to summarize, what we're asking for today is certification of the EIR, and I have Maria Martin here with me from the Environmental Management Group at the Bureau of Engineering, who handled the Environmental Impact Report together with Dr. Jan Green-Rebstock. And what it concludes is that we will have significant unavoidable impacts regarding air quality and air quality during construction, and land use because we are converting some lands that are currently zoned industrial to open space for ecosystem use. So given that, we are asking you to adopt the findings and statement of overriding considerations, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and approve the recommended plan, which is Alternative 20. Okay, so here's the next steps. We already talked a little bit about this. The Congress will act to authorize our project and to appropriate funds. In fact, the NEPA document has already been certified, correct? So we're good in that regard. And that's it. So I would like to turn it over to our new Deputy District Commander, Major Scotty Otan.
Chairman Mitch O'Farrell, Vice Chairman Price, Councilman Blumenfield, Councilman Rue. Members of the Parks Rivers Committee, I'm Major Scotty Otan, Deputy District Engineer for the Los Angeles District. On behalf of Colonel Gibbs, I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you here today in yet another important step in moving the Los Angeles River Ecosystem Restoration Project forward. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers recognizes the critical role we have in balancing our responsibilities among increasing interest along this great river. We are fully committed in the partnership to combine effective flood risk management, ecosystem restoration, and recreation, all of which are vital in this highly urbanized region. Throughout this process, the Corps has worked closely with the city, and together we were successful in receiving exceptions and waivers to national policies that allowed us to arrive at this juncture. The city offered flexibility from our typical project cost sharing. This offer, coupled with the exceptions to standard policies of the Corps, have made what seemed impossible possible. At this time, I'd like to review some of the key updates from the Corps regarding the Los Angeles River Ecosystem Restoration Project. The Chief of Engineers signed his report recommending authorization of this project on 18 December 2015. The report was forwarded and submitted to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Ms. Joellen Darcy. She reviewed the report and forwarded it to the President's Office of Management and Budget, and upon completion of the OMB review, the Chief's report is submitted to Congress for authorization. The LA River Restoration Project was approved and received appropriation to begin the next phase of this project, which is pre-construction engineering and design, or PED for short. During PED phase, we'll complete the detailed design and plans and specifications to get ready for construction. The Corps stands ready to execute the PED phase within the city at the earliest opportunity. The action of this committee here today would get us closer to begin the detailed design of the project. Chairman, I recognize that a strong partnership exists between the city and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers since the feasibility study began in 2006. I'd like to recognize the great work of my predecessors and our city counterparts. It's my heartfelt goal to continue this practice as we move forward. My tenure at the Los Angeles District is just beginning, but I already have a clear understanding of the significance of this project, not only for the city of Los Angeles, but for the Corps of Engineers. The scale of this project is monumental. Transformative restoration project is the first of its kind in the Corps. So it's important that we get this right, both in the traditional construction sense and our valued partnerships. Thank you once again for the opportunity to be here with the committee. I look forward to continuing this journey with you.
Thank you. Major Otan, have you been in kayak yet at the river?
I have not.
We'll have to get you out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else? Anything to add?
Councilman, I just wanted to acknowledge our project manager, Michael Affelt, and the river of people that have worked for so many years. Many of them are here in the room, and just say that that's what it's all about, people for many years being river-lentless. So I know you have been that way, and your staff has been fantastic. So I'd like to thank you for your leadership and thank them for the hard work they put in every day. So go Team River.
Thank you. Did you just say river-lentless?
Yeah. It's new.
Were you saving this moment for the big debut of River-lentless?
I was.
I like it.
Thank you.
It works. River-lentless is what it has taken. And, you know, a lot of discussions, a lot of challenging back and forth, and I know that. But as I said earlier, nothing worthwhile ever comes easy. So I think that the work of the River team, and I want to applaud the work of my office as well, Christine and Star and David and the RiverWorks team and BOE and Army Corps. It does take all hands on deck, and I've heard you say that before, Dr. Armstrong. All hands on deck to make good things happen. And the devil's always in the details, but we're hashing out the details now. And we're able to hold up our end of the bargain and our commitment at the same time, so we can make these good things happen based on the River Master Plan of 9 years ago now. A lot of water has floated under the bridge, and here we are at this point. So a few questions, if you please. Cost share has been a really big issue since the approvals started moving forward. And we have certain projects in certain reaches where the cost share is within what we've always expected in terms of the council doing its diligence in a 50-50. And so we've identified a lot of those opportunities. So can you point out some examples of that where we're able to move forward as quickly as we can with the cost share? And of course, we are working on mechanisms to come up with that match at the local level through EIFDs that Bob and I have been are on. So if you could expand on that a little bit, where that lies.
Sure. So fundamentally, the cost share, the expense on the city rests with the lands-related costs.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever there is a cost associated with us having to acquire a parcel and clean it up, that's going to cost more,
Mm-hmm.
and also probably take longer. So we have been speaking with our colleagues at the Corps of Engineers, and they have assured us that we do have flexibility in moving forward with implementation. And so there are certain areas within the Arbor Study reach, or the Arbor Study area, where we could have nearer term interventions in other reaches where the properties are already in public ownership,
Mm-hmm.
and where the interventions wouldn't require cleanups and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And in instances where we choose to move forward, and those are becoming much more clear, and you just mentioned it, parcels that we already own or have control over, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, while we wait for funds for other larger projects. And I'm just wondering aloud at the moment, which is always dangerous, are there opportunities, I wonder, where we don't enter into ownership of parcels, but we can enter in some sort of long-term lease to improve without acquisition? I wonder if that is part of our lexicon of thinking.
It is. In fact, moving forward, we can partner with others, such as California State Parks, which owns the bow tie site next to the river, but then they would also have to enter an agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers, in order to turn that LERD, or that land asset, over for the project. And then where there are parcels within the river channel itself, some are privately owned, some are publicly owned, but because they have an easement over them for flood protection, we would have to convert that easement into ecosystem use. So there are different kinds of sort of ownership that we can explore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and as far as next steps for design and implementation, what kind of funds are available for that, or what kinds of funds are we currently going after for that?
So near term, the city can go ahead and move forward on its own actions to prepare for that, such as property investigations and things like that. We are looking to partner with state agencies and others, potentially Prop 1 funds at the state, potentially non-Prop 1 cleanup funds for certain sites. But for planning, engineering, and design through the Corps, the president included $400,000 in his budget, and that appropriations process is underway. And so we feel very confident that the $400,000 will be appropriated in the next appropriations bill, and then the city would match that, and that would be the path by which we start to solidify those first agreements that are necessary for implementation.
Terrific.
Chairman, I also wanted to add that this year we have received funding to initiate the pre-construction engineering and design. It is the seed money for the Corps of Engineers to get the scope of PED and to draft the agreement. The funds that's in the President's budget right now will allow us to execute that agreement and conduct the detailed analysis next year.
Thank you. Did you say PAD?
PED.
PED.
Pre-construction engineering and design.
Okay, terrific. And specific to what? Specific to the overall?
Yeah. Yes,
all
sir.
20?
So,
or?
What we have planned on doing is that the initial work is to look at the entire 11 miles and make sure that we have the fundamentals of the design, beginning with hydrology and hydraulics, make sure that it is something that will function, the changes, the intervention that we are proposing will work from the technical sense. And then in addition to that, we will look at the geotechnical information. Those two together becomes the foundation of everything that we would like to do. And then the sequencing of moving forward with the features, that will be decided soon after.
And that preparation will be very important for future appropriations, clearly, because it'll be a guide for years to come.
Yes, sir.
In general.
Yeah,
so that's something
absolutely.
really important to get right. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, questions, comments, thoughts, ideas? Mr. Blumenfield.
Sure. Just in the vein of staying punny, I'll say this is riverific.
Okay.
And so appreciate all the great stuff that you guys are doing. And on this, and I can, this was just a couple of years ago. We were in D.C. trying to push for Alternative 20, and even though none of this is in my district, I represent upriver. I see the holistic picture here, and I'm just very excited about what's happening, and I think it's going to spur benefits throughout the river and investments throughout the river. Just a very minor thing. In the CEQA NEPA environmental impact documents, there's something that says construction, less than significant, operations, less than significant. I didn't know what all that meant. And that was, maybe it's just an unimportant detail, but I was seeing it in different places.
For the CEQA document, basically, you make findings as to whether an impact, and we look at various areas, various impact areas, about 17, including hydrology, water quality, et cetera. And we make findings in those areas as to whether the impacts are significant, less than significant, or no impact. So basically, that's what we're referring to. For this particular project, there were impacts that remained, even though we did adopt mitigation measures to reduce those impacts, there were impacts that remained significant even with mitigation. And those, as Dr. Carol Armstrong mentioned, are in land use and air quality. In the other areas, the impacts remained less than significant.
I think that particularly with air quality, it would be less than significant during operations because these would be ecosystem restoration parks. But they would be significant during construction. Because it would be ground disturbance and things like that in trucks.
But the net obviously is going to be very positive in terms of air quality, and the same thing with land use issues, right? It's a significant impact, I guess, but it's creating more open space.
The significance has to do with inconsistency because those lands were industrial and light industrial, so that's where the inconsistency comes in with the existing plans.
It's just a consistency rather than a
Yes.
value judgment in terms.
Yes.
And in the WRDA bill that we're talking about for 2016, where a lot of this is in, this is similar to stuff that's happening throughout the country, right? I mean, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how our plans under Alternative 20 are common to what's happening throughout the country, and if that matters at all.
Sir, the ecosystem restoration, which is the purpose of this project, is one of the 4 primary missions of the Corps. And we do receive substantial funding on a yearly basis, albeit it does not quite compare to navigation and flood control as well. But the LA River is both a flood control, a flood risk management structure, and on top of that, we are introducing ecosystem restoration. So the purpose, the need of the project, we hope will compete well in the future for construction funding in particular.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. I know you've been working on it for a long time, and as you said, this is 10 years in the making. All the previous council members and all the different entities that got engaged in this. I know, unlike Councilman Bloomfield, I do represent a lot of the river, and in many areas where we represent the other side of the river. And I'm very excited about this. And I remember when I first got a presentation by River LA, I saw right away why everyone else who's been working on the river is so excited, because this is the future of LA. And I know there's lots of concerns also. I'm being up to speed about the cost share, but I am confident, with all these great minds and all these different stakeholder interest groups, from the federal government to the state government, right? We just recently heard our speaker, Anthony Rendon, who is, I think half the time he spoke about the river. And I know our chair just met with him as well.
It was a great meeting on Saturday.
Yeah, so I do understand, and I do have concerns about the cost share, but at the same time, this is a project that we can not pursue. We need to pursue this. But just on that cost share aspect, can you just kind of maybe talk about the timeline? Obviously, it's not the city needs to come up with the money tomorrow. So maybe if you could just give a brief overview about the timeline, and also other potential avenues that we could pursue for helping with the city's portion of the cost share.
So I'll start. Thank you, Councilman. It is a long-term relationship, a long-term process. And again, we will motivate the movement by acquiring lands and cleaning them up and turning them over to the project. So if funds should become available from a variety of different sources, we would like to open it up to looking not only at park bonds, water bonds, transportation bonds, but creative public and private sector finance, and potentially infrastructure finance, things like that, tax increment value capture. We would like to prioritize the river in general, and this project in particular, for all different kinds of funding. And so we would like to work with our partners at the county and at the state and at the federal level, other federal departments as well, to move forward on aspects of the project. So that's pretty much the idea. Is we see a lot of public funding, of course, and we see a lot of different partners. And for the Corps' share, they will be getting their annual appropriations from Congress. So we will be working very closely with the Corps in working with our federal legislators and our delegation in Washington to get funds regularly appropriated to this project. And then as the local sponsor, we would be matching those funds.
Yeah. And I think the more we do like the frog spot, the more projects that we have, I think we'll have more actual projects to show. So I'm very much looking forward to it. I know it's going to be challenging, no doubt, especially in the funding area, because I'm sure everyone nationwide is asking for funds as well. But this is a project that we cannot pursue. We have to pursue. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rue. And before this committee, sometime in the fall, at the latest actually, we'll have our report on the study, the HR&R study on enhanced increment financing for the river. The initial feedback looks very promising, and that for all practical purposes could be the backbone of our local matches for the next few decades. So we'll get a full report on what that looks like. And then Dr. Armstrong just mentioned all the other possibilities. So I think we're on our way. Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much. All right, so panel, thank you so much. Anything else to add? Mr. Price, nothing yep, at this time? Thank you. All right, so thank you. Excellent work. 10 years of culmination here in committee, but we'll have one more vote after this, and that's when we can, really raise a toast to the river and talk about next steps. So thank you so much, panel. And before we get to comment cards, and we have plenty of them, what I'd like to do is I have one more question just in relation to all anticipated costs on the project, and I'm going to have Mr. Josh Romer from the CAO's office just answer a few questions related to that. One of the concerns we always have, and that's why I'm so excited about enhanced increment financing, is those monies can go toward remediation, brownfield remediation, et cetera. So along with the river, it's had 100 plus years of industrialization, and so there are considerable cleanup costs associated with restoration. And so, Mr. Romer, in relation to the draft EIR and all anticipated costs, fiscal impact. Could you please give us your thoughts?
Absolutely. Thank you. Josh Romer from the Office of the City Administrative Officer. As is very obvious, this is a very complex project. It's composed of dozens and dozens, hundreds even of smaller projects. The estimation of costs that's been done so far has been very rigorous and very sophisticated. But I did want to enter one point of information for the committee and for council's consideration, and it's regarding the fiscal impact statement. So essentially, one of the key characteristics of the relationship between the city and the Army Corps is that it's presumed that the city will be delivering the land clean to the Army Corps for improvements and recreation. But because it's presuming the delivery of the land is clean, then the cost sharing we're talking about so far doesn't necessarily incorporate the remediation costs. So I believe the current estimate for the cost of remediation is around $208 million. So the fiscal impact statement doesn't necessarily reference those yet. So I just wanted to make it clear that the fiscal impact statement should potentially include the $208 million estimated for remediation.
Okay. Terrific.
That being said, I mean, we definitely recognize that the city does drive the boat on each one of these individual projects, and there are a number of other resources available at all sort of levels to basically bring to bear on the project. So we definitely see a lot of potential to find other external sources, but those have not yet been identified, and we feel as long as the report does have a fiscal impact statement, it should reflect the known fiscal impact.
And so this is not news to us. We know that the remediation costs haven't been part of this project.
That's accurate.
So we know what we're getting into. Also, the reason it's good to talk about this is there are creative ways to still doing projects where we can be very creative with figuring out what the remediation requirements are, but still doing a project adjacent to or part of a project where we are still looking for identifying funding for remediation, soil contamination, et cetera. So it's just good to have this out front and know. Any questions or comments about this? Mr. Romer, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And before we move forward, we have several comment cards, and I'm going to give everyone 1 minute in the interest of time because there are so many. And I'd like to start with Chris Fleming, followed by William Preston Bowling, followed by Bobby Pepe, followed by someone who didn't put their name.
My part, sir.
It's not you.
Thank you.
Well, we'll figure that out. Well, these first three names.
Hello, I'm Chris Fleming, the Communications Manager with Friends of the Los Angeles River. And before saying anything else, I'd like to thank especially Council Members O'Farrell and Blumenfeld for their years of river-relentless support for this project. I'd like to speak, before my colleague speaks on some of the merits, I'd like to speak on behalf of our community, who we've engaged in an advocacy campaign to get out their support and to give them a chance to weigh in on how they feel about this project and to make sure that we keep the momentum going forward to turn this project into a reality. Over the weekend, we've had 270 individuals who've already signed on to support adoption of the recommended plan and the environmental impact report, and we hope to carry that through to the full City Council vote. And again, we'd like to thank you for our leadership on behalf not only of our organization, but our very energetic and passionate constituents who believe in this project completely. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Fleming. And so the next will be William Preston Bowling, then Bobby Pepe. And the person who didn't leave their name put on here LA River Ecosystem Restoration under name, and then Business Affiliation Urban Waters Federal Partnership. Oh, that would be okay. Great. That's you. You are now officially renamed LA River Ecosystem Restoration. Thank you.
Hi, William Preston Bowling, Special Projects Manager at Friends of Los Angeles River. I'd like to thank you all for the work you do on the river, and River Follies #3, the best video ever.
Thank you. Fun.
So I gave this to the bailiff. You all should have this letter from Mr. Lewis McAdams, the founder of Friends of Los Angeles River, urging you to adopt the Arbor EIR. And I think it's great that we heard today that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers already certified the NEPA. And I want to thank you for all your work on the river.
Thank you so much. Bobby Pepe, followed by LRER. I saw Bobby earlier. Maybe he's left already. Okay. Please.
Good
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and esteemed members of the committee. I'm Pauline Louie, and I apologize for not putting my name. I think I was too busy representing everybody else. But I just wanted to just come before you and say thank you on behalf of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. The partnership is 14 federal agencies that have been supporting the work that you all have been doing on the river and elevating this nationwide. So I think there was a comment earlier about how this is being seen across the country. LA River was one of the first 7 of the locations for Urban Waters Federal Partnership. We're up to 19 now, in part because of the good work that you guys are doing and because people are saying, I think we can believe in urban waterway revitalization because LA is doing it. In particular, I just wanted to point out that we're really thrilled for the 9 federal agencies that are directly here in LA have been working with the partnership with Army Corps.
You can wrap up.
Okay, thank you. And they've been working diligently behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to support this effort. It is one of the highest priorities on our work plan for the Urban Waters Federal Partnership here in LA. So we're just really thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Louie, and thanks for your leadership and stewardship and guidance and advocacy all these years as well. Outstanding. Thank you. All right, I'm going to next call on Herman, who just interrupted the previous speaker, and I want to note that she was interrupted by Herman, who was about to speak and give public comment for 1 minute on this item.
Just like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Item 9, and you have to stick with it.
Just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Poor people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Look at the pictures. We have Mr. O'Farrell, Mr. Bracero, whose office I went to this morning and wasted $6 of fucking bullshit to talk about the river. Talking about how good the U.S. Army is there for, to build a river that actually runs from north to south. Hoorah to the U.S. Army for that. But the rest of you poverty pimps, 1, 2, 3, you have no idea what you're doing to the ecosystem on the LA River. No, you don't have no idea.
Item 9, you have to stick with.
That's right. It has to do with the ecosystem of that river. I'm Native American. You don't think I care about the ecosystem? That's right. Brandenburg versus Ohio, 54-950, the Brown Act, and I'm going to exercise my First Amendment and say, fuck you.
Thank you for elevating the conversation. Next we have Robin Mark, followed by Brian Baldoff, followed by Maria Camacho.
Good afternoon.
Hi, and welcome.
Hi. I'm with the Trust for Public Land. The Trust for Public Land has been acquiring land and building parks along the Los Angeles River for over 20 years, and I'm thrilled to be here today to share our support for the city's adoption of the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study, EIR, and the recommended plan Alternative 20. Revitalization of the LA River, as called for by Alternative 20, will create much-needed access to open space for thousands of Angelinos and create a replicable model for the remaining 41 miles of river not impacted by this plan. We believe this is the city's opportunity to further lead the charge on reclaiming Los Angeles' great river and improving quality of life throughout the region. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Mark. Brian Baldoff, followed by Maria Camacho.
Good afternoon, esteemed committee members. My name is Brian Baldoff. I'm a project manager at the Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority. We're a joint powers authority of the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. We support the city's continued investment to improve the Los Angeles River and your leadership to set the environmental quality and recreation as a priority. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and MRCA have invested in the LA River for over 25 years, together working with the city and partners. We commend the thought and leadership to balance protection of public and the environment. Currently, the state has currently secured funding for a portion of this project of Arbor, the Taylor Yard G2, and we're directly working to achieve lands needed for Arbor to move forward. So we support and request your approval of the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project and look forward to continued work with the city and partners to make the river a place for all Angelinos and all wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Camacho.
Good afternoon, esteemed Committee Chair O'Farrell and committee members. Maria Camacho on behalf of River LA. I'm here to support and acknowledge the years of input and analysis offered on Arbor and Alternative 20 and the incredible demonstration of widespread support given the numerous and varied benefits of the projects that could result from approval of this EIR and the recommended plan. River LA is here to stand by the City Council and the Army Corps in support of its implementation of the proposed LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project and Alternative 20. Thank you for your hard work on this effort.
Thank you so much. And our last speaker is someone who knows a thing or two about this, and that is Jill Suriel, formerly with the office of Councilmember Ed Reyes.
Thank you, Councilmember, for that very nice introduction. Good afternoon. As Councilmember O'Farrell mentioned, my name is Jill Suriel, and I'm presently serving as the Urban Conservation Director for the Nature Conservancy here in Los Angeles. I'm thrilled to be here to support the project and to applaud your riverletlessness over the many years that this has taken to come to fruition. I also the mission of the Nature Conservancy is to preserve the lands and water on which all life depends. And so the fact that we're doing that in Los Angeles, in the heart of the city, with the LA River as a centerpiece is really, I think, a great step for our organization. And I want to assure you that the investment that you're making is really being met by philanthropic dollars and by interest in the city as a whole. We have generous support from the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, and we're wrapping up a 2.5-mile habitat assessment study from Griffith Park to Taylor Yard. And so that is going to be available this summer, and we're really looking forward to building on your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I can't wait to see that report. That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And before we move the item, I understand there's a clarification from the Army Corps of Engineers, Ed de Mesa.
Thank you, Chairman O'Farrell. I just wanted to clarify that from the Corps of Engineers, we have completed the study process. We have completed the feasibility report. We have offered that for state and agency comments. We've received all those comments, and we have addressed everything. We have a report that is ready to move forward to Congress. The action that is commensurate to the CEQA certification, that will be taken somewhere down the line when we are ready to send the report to Congress. But at this point, everything that is presented in the report, in the NEPA component of the report, that has already been addressed, and we're ready to move forward. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you for that clarification. All right, colleagues, seeing as everyone in this room has such great reverence for the LA River, I had to throw one out there. You challenged me. I'm going to recommend that we move to certify and adopt the EIS for the Los Angeles River Arbor study, and that we move it to council without objection. Seeing as there are no objections, the item is moved. Thank you so much. And that, Mr. Sutton-Willis, I believe is our last agenda item.
We have cleared the agenda, yes, sir.
Seeing as that to be the case, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.